Lesson 95, Grapho. Our new word for this lesson is grapho. And so again, we're going to have a verb stem, and we're going to have personal endings added to the verb stem. I'm going to give you all 6 present tense forms all at once. And I would urge you to practice with the stem and the personal endings. As I say here in the book, gamma, rho, alpha, phi, graph, that's the stem of the verb. So you can get a piece of paper and you can write that stem down, and then you can practice adding personal endings. By now, hopefully you can say the endings from memory. O, ace, a, omen, eta, usi, or usin. So in the first person singular, we take graph, which is the stem, and we add omega, which is the personal ending, and it all adds up to grapho, which means I write. In the second person singular, we take the verb stem, which is graph, and we add ace, epsilon, iota, sigma. And that gives us graphes, which means you write. In the third person singular, we add a, that's epsilon, iota, graphe, so he, she, or it writes, and so on and so forth. Graphomen, we write, graphete, y'all write, graphusin, they write. So as you learn about Greek verbs, and as you learn each new verb, take note of what the stem is, and then take note of what the personal endings are, memorize the personal endings, and then practice adding them to the stem. And this will help you in several ways. It will help you to be more discerning as you look at a Greek verb. You'll be able to see the different parts of it. Also, you'll be able to recognize the personal endings more easily because you'll be more familiar with them. And as you may have noticed, I've been trying to guide you toward approaching ancient Greek as if it's a spoken language. And so if you start to speak ancient Greek and you know these endings really well, you'll be able to compose sentences in Greek verbally because you'll know what ending to put on the verb. So whenever you learn a new verb in ancient Greek, learn what the stem is, practice adding the personal endings, and practice figuring out what each form of the verb means and how the personal endings generate meaning and how they communicate meaning. And if you get good at that, it's going to take you a long way in your Greek studies. You'll really be cooking if you can learn how to do that. Let's take a look at our example sentence. Let's take a look at the verb. Here we have graphe. Notice that that is our new verb for this lesson. The stem is graph. And then we have the epsilon iota ending. That's the third person singular ending. So graphe will say he, she, or it writes, or he, she, or it is writing. The subject is ho philosophos, which means the philosopher. And the adverb polakis means often. So this example sentence says the philosopher writes often. We could say the philosopher is writing often, but that doesn't sound as natural. It sounds more natural, that is, smoother sounding English, to say the philosopher writes often, or perhaps the philosopher often writes. In our exercises, we have the word hoti that we learned in the previous lesson, and that means because. So number 1, polakis grapho says I write often. Hoti means because, and then philosophos me means I am a philosopher. So number 1 says I write often because I am a philosopher. Moving on to number 3, let's take a look at the verb. It says katheodomen. Notice that the verb ending is omicron, mu, epsilon, nu. That omen ending is first person plural. So as soon as you look at that verb, you know that the action is being done by we. Okay, so we are doing something. What are we doing? Katheodo. That verb means to sleep. So katheodomen means we sleep or we are sleeping. The stem is katheod. And then the ending is omen. Put it all together. Katheodomen we sleep or we are sleeping. In number 4, grafe is the verb for writing. The stem is graf, and the ending is epsilon iota. That's third person singular. So grafe says he, she, or it writes, or he, she, or it is writing. In number 5, katheudusin is the verb. Notice that the ending of the verb is usin. Okay, that's third person plural. So whatever that verb is doing, you know the action is being done by they. Okay, they are doing the action. So katheudusin says they sleep or they are sleeping. In number 6, graphes. Take a look at the ending of the verb. It's epsilon iota sigma. That's the second person singular personal ending. So graphes says you write or you are writing. In number 7, trechomen. We have omen as the ending of the verb. That means we are doing the action. So trechomen says we run or we are running. Okay, so I'm just giving you a sampling of how you can analyze these verbs by looking at the stem and the personal ending. And once you get accustomed to these personal endings, it just becomes easier and easier to translate because you know who the action is being done by. So as you continue along, watch out for stems and endings and how they add up to generate a meaningful verb.